Urban Media Today talks sports with Ray Porter Jr., Vince Butts, and Trevin A. Jones on Urban Media Today Radio.
It's game time!
Urban Media Today talks sports. I'm not going to tell you who's here. You already know. But I am going to say that Coach Kenneth Blakeney, the head men's basketball coach from Howard University, is joining us today. Got to give him props. Ray and Greg, you're on your own. Anyway, we were talking just before the break about some recruiting. And I was saying to Coach Blakeney that he faces a particular challenge. And what I mean by that is Dr. Frederick at Howard University and the athletic director, Kerry Davis, as well as Derek Bryant, the assistant sports information director, and Herman Shelton. I got to mention them too. The focus is not necessarily on sports when you're recruiting an athlete. The focus is on the academics and then the sports. Correct, Coach?
That is 100% correct. Growing up in D.C. And not too far from the Howard campus, the one thing that anybody ever understood growing up in D.C. is that Howard is an academic institution, and that's the thing that really we hang our hat on. And I'm certainly proud of that. And Dr. Wayne Frederick, as you mentioned, our president, and Mr. Kerry Davis, our athletic director, both come from academic backgrounds. And that's the beautiful partnership that I think we all have in common. We really preach education first. We preach, the value of an education. And, for me, having a chance to work at Harvard University, having a chance to work at Columbia University, I think allowed me probably a little bit more of a vision into the way that you have to go about recruiting academic kids. So, I hear a lot of people talk about, Howard needs to make concessions to get student athletes in. And I'm like, why do they have to do that? Like, we don't have to lower our values. We don't have to lower what we do in order to make ourselves, more attractive to student athletes. One of the things we do is we stand on the shoulders of giants. And what I mean by that is the Thurgood Marshalls, the Kamala Harris, the Andrew Youngs, the David Dinkins, the Toni Morrisons, the Tanashi Coates, the Stanford Retts, the Gus Johnsons, all of these wonderful people who accomplish so much, we stand on the shoulders of them. So we're not going to, lower our standards or our values to try to win games. We can do that by doing it the right way.
And that's awesome. And I have to say this, Coach. I had the pleasure of being at the last game that you played last year at the tournament. I got a chance to ask you a couple questions. But there were a couple of gentlemen that were sitting next to you at that podium when we got to do that last press conference. And I'm talking about Wayne Bristol Jr. and I'm talking about Charles Williams, particularly Charles Williams, because I got to see him grow up from his freshman year to his senior year. And he got to meet you because I guess you met him by his junior year and you got to coach him his senior year, correct?
I met CJ the summer of his going into his senior year, yes.
The summer of going to, and just to see that type of, when you talk about student athlete, and you talk about somebody transcending the sport because of even personal things that were going on in his life, making it to work with you every day. And he seemed like he was you on the court. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think, what it was, I wish I could coach him another year. Coach, is that another one?
Mm-hmm. 5-star, here we go. Oh, yeah. 5-star. Hey, show us welcome to Zamunda. The man has his own money. Don't forget the rose petals now.
But working with CJ, I wish that I had another year. He is as a quality of young man that you could ever be around. He got a great sense of humor. He's quick-witted, really smart, really intelligent. I love his mom and dad, both good people and very supportive of the program. And I was so proud of him and Wayne on that day, the way they handled themselves. They conducted themselves in that interview, especially after a tough season-ending loss to A&T. It was just a great moment, I thought, for all of us to be on that stage to kind of, look back a little bit, look at that moment that we just had, but look back a little bit. And I think even though we were 4-29, I thought we always got better. And a big part of that was CJ and the way he kind of conducted themselves and approached work every day.
Right, and the reason I brought that up too, Coach, was because you could see the pride in you. I know it was after a tough loss because nobody even expected you to be in the second round, and this was the Meac tournament at the Scope. Actually, the day before the tournament was actually stopped, is what I'm referring to, and it was a press conference after the 86-77 loss to North Carolina A&T, which the Bison surprised A&T because they hung in there tough, and they could have, like in the second half, they actually outscored the Aggies, to be honest with you. But when I looked at the individuals like CJ, Charles Williams, and you looked at Wayne Bristol Jr. and his growth, and you looked at Zion Cousins, the way he just was he's a heady player, where he would take a charge, get done whatever you needed to get done at the time that you needed to do it. When you referred to student athletes, I thought about those gentlemen, and that's why I referred to that moment, because you could actually see the pride in you. And what I want you to comment on, if you don't mind, is these gentlemen were dealing with not only playing in the tournament, but the unknowingness of what's going to happen outside of the tournament going on around the Scope because of the COVID-19 situation was just getting started.
Yeah, no, it was an incredibly unknown, situation, to be honest with you. We didn't know much about COVID. We knew that there were some tournaments at the time that were being canceled. The Ivy League tournament had canceled. The NBA had canceled its season. So we were just, I think at that point in time, the momentum was just kind of picking up. And, I had no idea. I just used to carry a little hand sanitizer bottle with me. And at that point was starting to get nervous about, okay, like I know where our guys are, so I know we're good with everything, but what about everyone else? So I kept on, I kept the bottle under my chair or in my pocket, and I would, every time I'd shake the ref's hand or the opposing coach's hands, no offense, I would go to the sanitizer bottle, just not knowing. And I remember the press conference that we had, one of the questions was that, and I just addressed it, and it was like, I don't know what's going on right now because this is a different world. We don't have any information, but we have to kind of understand this and do right by our student athletes.
And if you can, Coach, talk about the strength mental wise, like in their mind, the mindset of the players, what it took for them just to focus on playing the game. I know they were excited about beating South Carolina State the day before, but they had to prepare themselves to play this game. And then how did you keep everything else that was going on around them away from them so that they could focus?
Yeah, being down in Norfolk, we're kind of in our own little bubble down there. Okay. We're sequestered at a hotel that was maybe 20 minutes away from the Scope, and we had our walkthrough and practices. So we during our road trips and even try to do at home, we try to occupy a lot of their time, so we can try to keep them focused. And we did a good job, like you mentioned. We outscored them in the second half. We had a slow first half, and I think if we I think with that, the focus was a little bit all over the place to start. I think that we came into the game still celebrating the South Carolina State victory, and it took us till halftime to kind of shake that off a little bit and start to play some really good basketball. Our last 4 or 5 games, I thought we played the best, but for our guys to kind of lock in down at Norfolk, understanding that COVID was starting to be something that was going to affect us, I thought our guys did a really nice job.
Excellent. And the reason I even brought that up, Coach, is I wanted everybody to see. I hear people talking about Howard Bison 4-29, 4-29, and I'm thinking to myself, wait a minute, there was more to that 4-29 that people realized. And I think if people had gotten, if the alum have come out to support the team even more, because alum did support the team, I'm not saying they didn't, but I'm thinking if people got to see what was actually taking place, I think they would have even more a greater respect for the fact that you guys did go 4-29 that season, because it could have been a lot worse.
No, it could have been. The thing that I try to explain, and I don't want to defend myself or sound like I'm a victim, because I'm not. I was the second to last head coach in Division I to be hired. And when I got the job, we had either 50 points graduate or transfer out of the program. So we understood it was going to be challenging. And, when you talk about the academics and doing it the right way, my conversations with with Dr. Wayne Frederick and our AD, Mr. Kerry Davis, we talked about a rebuilding process and bringing young men in that fit the culture and the kind of picture that, Dr. Wayne Frederick and Mr. Kerry Davis both wanted. So we always are aligned on building this thing and building it the right way. And, so we had to take our knocks and we had to go through it to get to the other side. So I think this year, we did a great job with our guys of, I think, learning how to play the game the way that I would like it to be played, where we're sharing the ball, we're playing a style that's fun to watch, a style that's fun to play, but also having an opportunity to be able to share the ball, spread the ball around where everybody has an opportunity to showcase their skills and ability.
Awesome, awesome. And speaking about growth, the foundation has been laid because despite the record, you've gotten attention of some top prospects across the country. Was it McCord Maker? I think it was one, and Nogel Eastern was the other one that I've noticed. And then there's like Mikey Williams is talking about HBCUs on Twitter and social media. So, I mean, you got something going on, Coach, because, I mean, if people are so looking at the record and say, that's not good, these gentlemen see something different because you've gotten their interest.
Well, I think it's been a culmination of everything, right? It's relationships that certainly go beyond, the court and basketball. There's years of some of those relationships. But I also think at the moment, since Mr. George Floyd was murdered, our world has changed and some things have shifted. And these young men that are in high school right now and these young men that are in college, they've seen since they were little kids, LeBron James, Chris Paul, Carmelo Anthony, Malcolm Jenkins, Colin Kaepernick. They've seen these guys stand up and fight social justice or education reform and, police brutality. So my generation was just kind of like, okay, Republicans buy shoes too, right? This generation is standing up and they're fighting the power. And when these young men who have seen that for their whole lives see a moment that happened tragically in Minnesota like it did, it makes them start to rethink about, how do I need to look at things going forward for myself? What about my education? Do I need to look at HBCUs as the viable institution where I can gain a great education? Because maybe the Power 5 or the PWI schools aren't serving me the right way. So it's such a tragic moment, but during this moment, we were able to really, I think, catch lightning in a bottle. And, the recruiting of some of those guys that you mentioned had already started taking place well before any of these incidents happened. I just think it brought an awareness and a wokeness to a lot of student athletes about HBCUs and Howard University.
Hey, Coach, if I can interject again. So I really want to talk about, because I'm in recruiting, that's all I do is recruiting. So I really want to kind of debunk that student athletes aren't smart. Just to get into UCLA, to get into Duke, these are very, very competitive schools. To get into Baylor, to get into some of these schools that some of our African-American athletes are pretty much just falling to because, hey, this is the school, this is what everybody does. But here we have Howard, that also an academic school that's super competitive and has a, like you said, lightning in a bottle alumni network. And as many people come on campus, and I know my mind is just flooded with all kind of questions to ask you, but I really want to just kind of talk about the athletes and how, people may have said in the past that, athletes they're not smart, but to go to these schools, to go to Duke, to go to Harvard, to go to Columbia, to go to UCLA, you got to have some grades to get in there. So these athletes, they do have the grades. And I'm talking to every athlete listening to right now. If you have the grades, make sure you do your homework. And Coach, if you can elaborate on what Howard offers from an academic standpoint versus maybe a UCLA or maybe a Stanford or even maybe a Duke.
Yeah, no, great points and great questions. My minimum is a 3.0 1,000 or a 20 on the ACT. So we have to start the conversation there. And I just was texting one of my assistant coaches, and we had a film that was sent to us. And the first question I sent, I was like, reach out, but let's see that transcript and let's see that SAT, ACT score, because we can't even really begin conversations until we understand that the young men can do that kind of work. Like I mentioned earlier, we got more people on Capitol Hill than any other university in the country. The people that I've mentioned that were the first, we have a history and a tradition that is second to none. And, we're the only HBCU that's in the top 100 universities in the country. So there's a long-standing, proud history and tradition that surrounds Howard University. Our current GPA for our basketball team alone is a 3.0. So we have guys that are doing it on the court, but also doing it in the classrooms, which I'm really proud of.
And that's awesome. We're talking to head coach Kenneth Blakeney, Howard University head coach, and he actually knows what he's talking about because there was a young brother from Harvard that went to the NBA and lit up the NBA up in New York. I think he knows who I'm talking about. Mr. Jeremy was it Jeremy Lin, coach. you had something to do with his going to Harvard, if I'm not mistaken, because you were involved in his recruitment, correct?
Yeah, well, Jeremy is a fascinating story, and he had a moment where for about a month he probably was the most popular person on the world, which is an incredible accomplishment. Jeremy comes from Palo Alto, California, and when he was recruited, he was the Northern California Player of the Year, but did not get one athletic scholarship. So it basically came down between MIT, which is a Division III school, and Harvard University, and he ended up choosing Harvard. And his first year, he just had a so-so year. Minutes were spotty, trying to work his way through and understand what it takes to be a college basketball player. And he came back his sophomore year, and we were actually hired his sophomore year, to start his sophomore year. I'm watching him for the first month, and I'm just kind of like, this dude has some things that are a little bit different from him. And I'm a big, I may watch things that the normal, coach or the normal spectator may not watch. I can watch a half of a game and just watch people's feet, which is maybe a little odd. But he had the ability to start and stop on a dime. And he could accelerate from 0 to 60 really, really fast. And when I saw that, it reminded me of high major footwork and high major speed and quickness. So once I saw that, I was like, okay, this dude is a little different. And then I saw his basketball IQ, his feel for the game, an incredible passer, a guy that made plays. We called him a playmaker. And then he really understood and got a great feel for ball screens. So it was kind of like a magical moment where, he had 3 years with playing in that system with Coach Tommy Amaker. I was very lucky enough to be an assistant coach there and have a chance to work with him. So all the things that we kind of prepared him for when he got to the Knicks, it was the perfect fit because Coach D'Antoni runs so many ball screens. So Jeremy had seen, what I counted up to probably 9,000 ball screens when he was at Harvard. And with those 9,000 ball screens, it's almost like the 10,000 hour rule. Like you can master things at a 10,000 hour point. He had mastered the ball screens coming out of Howard. So, NBA game is a spread open court. He's really good with ball screens, and he can really drive the ball to the basket. So I was a very Black Forrest Gump moment that I had to be a small part of that story of Linsanity.
Awesomeness. See, his awesomeness spreads. It's at the Mecca right now on the Hill in D.C. at Howard University, but it spreads because he's talking about Harvard. He's been at Columbia. I mean, James Madison. He's been at James Madison. He's been at Duke. I mean, it's just all over the place. Coach Kenneth Blakeney is who we're talking about. It's Urban Media Today Talks Sports. We're going to be right back after this timeout.
Urban Media Today is your source for entertainment, news, sports, and lifestyle. It's your online resource for health and fitness, providing tips to decrease your heart disease or increase your good spirits. When you can't find who made the top picks in HBCU sports or what part of the country is most exciting or affordable to travel with the entire family, Urban Media Today is there to provide you with all that you need and just a click away. Log on to urbanmediatoday.com now. Find us on social media. Urban Media Today, your lifestyle information and blog website.